Hey everybody, so happy to see you. And Barry, look what I have today.
That looks like a watermelon.
That is a watermelon. It is a very heavy watermelon, actually. Um, and then I'm wondering if you know what this might be. What does that look like to you?
That to me looks like a walnut.
That is a walnut, and a walnut is about the size of a golf ball, and it actually grows um, inside of something where it is just a little bit bigger than that, smaller than my fist, right? It grows inside of a husk that's smaller than my fist, that walnut. Um, but where do they grow? Like, where do they actually grow? Do you know that?
I do know that. Uh, Watermelons grow in our gardens. They grow on the ground in vines, like a squash or something like that. And watermelons can get really big, and some people, grow gigantic watermelons. They go onto pickup trucks and stuff like that. But watermelons grow in our garden on vines, and walnuts grow in trees, walnut trees, which are really pretty. And so, yeah, that's where they are.
That is true. So we actually have some pictures of that. So um, this is our walnut. There they are growing inside of their little husks. That is a walnut tree right there. So a pretty big tree with some big branches.
Very
Here's
cool.
our watermelon. And there's some watermelons growing with those little vines we were talking about. And I actually know a story about watermelons and walnuts. So this story is an Islamic parable. And a parable is a story that has a universal lesson. That means that it has a message that applies to anybody that hears it, no matter where they live or how old they are, or anything like that. So this is a Islamic parable. And the guy in this parable, his name is Hoda. And Hoda was kind of known for being a trickster. Like, a lot of his stories are kind of funny and they're really simple. But then after you listen to it, you're like, that was actually, there's a lot more to that story than I thought. So this is the story of the watermelon and the walnut. One day, Hoda was sitting in a beautiful garden, and he was sitting in the shade of a tree, and he could see all the wonderful things that were growing in that garden. And he was looking up at the tree, and he realized it was a walnut tree, and he could see the walnuts up there. And looking around at the flowers and the vegetables growing in the garden, and he saw some watermelons. And he said, sometimes I just don't understand God. Here is this great big tree with these big heavy branches, but these tiny little walnuts growing on them. And then here's these big watermelons on these tiny little vines here in the garden. Shouldn't that be reversed? And just then a walnut fell and it hit Hoda right on the top of his bald head. And he jumped to his feet and he said, "Oh God, you are so wise. Where would I have been if watermelons grew on trees?" All right, Barry, you can just imagine what might have happened to Hoda if a watermelon had fallen on his head instead of that tiny little walnut. Um, but I'm curious, what do you think the lesson in that story is?
Well, I think the lesson is that there's a kind of a bigger plan than we might see going on, because the perfect place for the watermelon is on the ground with those little vines, and the perfect place for the walnut is up in the trees. And I think if we can learn to appreciate things all around us the way that they are, we kind of see God's plan and the way God's plan is unfolding all around us. And we also realize that we're a part of it, and we have everything we need, and we're in the right place too, and we're growing in the right place. I think that's a good thing to remember as we grow up, that we're right where we need to be, and we're growing in a garden of our own. So that's yeah, that's what I get with this one.
Well, I like to think that God has a plan and that everything is working out the way it is supposed to. But does that mean that we shouldn't ask questions? Like in the story, Hoda was asking, like, why are these walnuts up here and these watermelons down here? Like, if there's a plan, does that mean I shouldn't ask any questions about it?
No, I think we should always be asking questions because that's how we figure things out, and it's also how we gain more confidence. You know, he asked the question that's like, why aren't the watermelons up in the tree? And then he was in that question when the walnut hit him in the head, and it was like, okay, this makes sense now. I asked the question, I just got an answer, and I think that we should always be questioning the things that are around us, and that's how we learn. We learn by asking questions, and the world around us continues to show itself and answer our questions as we go.
Well, I've noticed for me that I feel a lot better and a lot happier when I look for the good and assume everything that's happening is for my good. And then I'm trusting that God is wants good for me, right? I believe that wholeheartedly that God wants good for me. And that is actually part of our affirmation for today. Our affirmation is I always look for the good. I always look for the good. And you like to add another part to this. What do you like to add, Barry?
I look for the good and praise it. I look for the
Great.
good and give thanks for it. You know, it's all around me. And if I keep looking for it, I'm going to keep finding it.
Awesome. All right, friends. Love spending time with you. We'll see you again soon.